Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the Lexicon and to Murder One. We are delighted to be here this afternoon. We are brought to you by Dun Laoghaire Libraries, which is why we're in such a fabulous building, and by the Arts Council, who are providing us with the funds to live stream the event. And we're joined online by a whole bunch of people who are watching us. Good evening or good afternoon, I should say, to everybody out there. If you are watching online, you can tweet us at Murder One Fest and ask your questions of Steve Cavanagh, and Breda will be able to field them through. If you have audience questions, we will be picking those up later too. So I am going to leave you with Breda Brown, who's going to have a little chat to Steve Cavanagh.
Hi everyone, delighted to see you all here, delighted to have Steve here. I suppose just a little bit of context, I'm sure everybody probably knows you, but just to put a little bit of context on it. So you're a Northern Irish author, you've written 9 novels. It is 9, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
we
were trying to do a little count earlier on, you weren't sure.
No, I'm still not sure.
If anybody knows, tell us. And they've all either been nominated for an award or won an award.
Yeah.
That's some achievement.
Well, that's just luck of the Irish.
I know, don't know about that. You're best known then for the Eddie Flynn series, and the latest one is called The Accomplice, and that's out now. And Eddie Flynn is a con artist turned lawyer who only represents people that he knows are innocent. Steve Cavanagh, meanwhile, is a lawyer turned writer. Is that right?
That's right.
Meaning that obviously that you're uniquely positioned then to bring us, I suppose, the tension of the courtroom. And we're going to be chatting about this later on. But Steve, I am saying that you're a lawyer turned writer, but that's not really overly accurate, is it? Because you were writing from quite a young age.
I was, yeah. I used to like in school when you were told you had to write a story and things like this. I used to enjoy that. And then when I was sort of in my late teens, early 20s, I wrote screenplays for a while. I wrote a couple of screenplays. Managed to get an agent in London, but never got any of the screenplays sold.
But why did you go down the screenplay route?
Well,
it's quite unusual.
Well, I never thought I'd be able to write a book because that was too long. It's 400 pages, whereas the screenplay's only like 100 pages.
Right, short and
so
snappy.
So it's short, and and I loved. As much as I read, I watched movies as much as I read books. So I thought that might be slightly easier. And but it didn't work out.
So you found an agent, you tried to obviously get the work put on somewhere, but it just didn't happen.
Just didn't happen at all, no.
And what was that rejection like? Was it tough?
Well, it was okay. It was fine. I was just a wild hope, but it was sort of a shot in the dark and no more than that. I never sort of thought I will be a great screenwriter someday, and it's only these idiots holding me back. My talent will get me there. I wasn't thinking that at all. If it was like wee bit like saying I'm going to be an astronaut.
Right.
It's a wild dream. So when I was rejected, I thought, yeah, that's fair enough.
And you didn't think to try writing a book or anything at that time?
No, I thought, well, that's me. Now I'm finished. So I then fell into the law after that, and I did that for about 15 years then before I ever tried to write anything else after that.
And you say you fell into law, but obviously that was your career at the time. So, and this is obviously feeding so much into the books that you're writing now. So you were, you did quite a number of roles, but you were a solicitor, but you were also an investigator in a law firm.
Yeah, that's how I started out. It was a firm in Northern Ireland who started off representing guys in the shipyards in the 70s. And then they were so good at doing that, the insurance companies basically said, you come and work for us. And they tended to employ solicitors who had a wee bit more sort of street sense and savvy, more so than great academic achievement.
Is that what you had, Steve, then? Is that what you're saying?
I did
street
have that.
Sense.
Yeah, I had a little bit of that, yes. So because, there was a lot of genuine people who were genuinely hurt in factories or car accidents or whatever, but there were also a lot of claims which were manufactured. And they thought that people who weren't so far removed from a factory worker would be able to see the schemes maybe a bit better than somebody who was from Cherry Valley and had a 2-1. It was called Nigel or Alistair. So that's how I got my break working there. And then I got an apprenticeship and I qualified through that firm.
But you were passionate about it?
No, not then at all.
Really?
I just thought it was not at all. I thought it was a job, and it was interesting. You know, I
Right.
got to go lots of places and speak to people, investigate stuff, and it was kind of interesting. But that sort of corporate law firm thing didn't really work for me. I met a lot of great people there that I learned a hell of a lot from, and I made lots of friends there. But that wasn't for me. So I was there for about 8 years, and then I moved to a small firm where I was representing ordinary people, and I was doing a mix of criminal stuff and civil rights work and personal injury work. So I was sort of gamekeeper turned poacher
Right.
there, and I enjoyed that very much.
So the writing kicked back in then when?
It was about 2011. My mum, who was the only person who ever really encouraged me to write anything, she passed away quite suddenly. And I thought I'd never, she was the only one who ever told me I could write. And I thought, I'm going to try and write something that she would like. So I wrote my first book in secret.
In secret?
Yeah.
How did you do it in secret?
Well, I tell you what it is. The car phone warehouse played a part in this.
Great
because
ad.
there was a time when if you got a mobile phone through the car phone warehouse, they gave you a wee laptop. So, because I didn't want to invest in my writing, to me it was just a pipe dream. So I got a free laptop, and it was like that thick at the
Right.
time, and weighed about 5 pounds, and took 10 minutes to turn on when you opened it up, and a tiny wee screen. So I wrote the first draft of the defence on a free version of Word that I'd found somewhere. And when I eventually had written it, my wife read it and says, "This is not too bad." She's seen me at the computer. She says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm writing a book." And she went, "Ah, yeah, dead on." But then she did like it when it was done, and I worked on it after that.
And then, but when you sat down to write it on the free computer, like, did you have an idea in your head, or why didn't you not write a screenplay if that's what you'd done before?
Well, no, I thought I'm going to try and write a book, because when Mum read books, she read about 4 or 5 books a week. And I thought, and I was reading more at the time,
Yeah.
and I thought, no, you try and get a book done. And it was at that time as well, it was much, much harder to get any kind of a movie made anywhere. There weren't, even then, that stopped making the type of movies that I was interested in. So I thought, well, look, there's no chance for that. Just try and write a book.
So
And see if you can get it published. I wanted to see it on a shelf in a bookstore. That was my
Right.
aim for writing it.
Your aim for writing it and for her to be proud.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So where did Eddie Flynn come from then? How did you conjure him up?
It sort of occurred to me one day when I was in court and cross-examining someone that con artists and trial lawyers have the same set of skills.
Right.
So there's like misdirection and distraction and persuasion, and all of those skills are there in the two professions. So I thought it would be interesting to write about a character who used to be a con artist and took all of those skills and tricks and cons and became a lawyer. And I thought that he'd be quite good. He'd be very effective. So that intrigued me. Also, it was the type of character that I hadn't seen before, because most lawyers in movies and stuff and TV and books, they're all very successful. And they all work in these high-rise buildings with glass, and it's LA law and all stuff like that. But there hadn't been like a Columbo type sort of character,
Yeah.
a character who was a wee bit more downhill. And I thought that would be interesting to write, and it was.
Why did you set it in the US?
A couple of reasons. One, I loved US crime fiction. That was my main thing. I read crime fiction from all over the world, but American crime fiction is my favourite. And also, if I set it in the UK, we have a dual system of representation. Same here in Ireland. There's barristers and solicitors. And the barrister would be doing all the cool stuff in court, and the solicitor wouldn't just, they just don't really. So I thought, well, that would be hard to write two main characters. It would be very imbalanced. And one of the characters would have to wear a wig and a funny gown. And I thought, that's not going to suit the type of book that I want to write.
Yeah.
And there'll be, that's not going to work at all. That'll be a comedy. So setting it in the US solved all those problems.
So you wrote the first draft. Your wife said, not bad. Did you go back to the same agent you had previously, or how did you go about getting publishing?
No, I don't know what happened to that guy. I can't even really remember his name, the first agent.
I'd say he remembers you at this point, all right?
He may
He's
remember
probably quite
me.
sorry.
But no, I then had to set about trying to get an agent and working on the book and redrafting it. So it took me about 6 or 7 months to get an agent. and then I was lucky enough that, I got a 3-book deal. So I thought, that's great. I've got 3 books now, 3 chances now to learn how to write a book. And I went on from there.
And just to go back to Eddie Flynn and the type of character he is, and I suppose what I love about him is how he has developed over all of the books. So again, when you sat down and wrote the first one, did you think then afterwards about, okay, how am I going to develop him out over the next couple of books, or did it just happen?
I think it just sort of happened. The first few books, he's kind of on his own. They're nearly all in first person, and you're just with Eddie. The reason I did that is in the first book, he's trapped basically in one building for the whole book. And I wanted the reader to feel as if they were trapped along with him, so it's in first person. But then I thought, well, no, I want to bring in more characters, and for you, the reader, to be able to see what's happening when Eddie's not there, because that creates much greater opportunities for suspense. And that naturally then grew the story out and expanded it out. And a lot of writers do the same thing, especially mystery writers who traditionally start off writing in first person. There'll come a point where say, no, I want to see a bigger story here. Yeah, that worked. And then I thought, well, it's going to be very unrealistic for Eddie to be able to do this all on his own. He's going to need some help. So his mentor, Harry Ford, who was in the first few books and had little parts in them. And then the third book, I brought in an investigator for Eddie, and now he has this whole new sort of team around him. I wrote a standalone book called Twisted, and in that book there's a police officer, a sheriff's deputy called Block, who I really liked. She was a really fun character to write, and I brought her then into the Eddie Flynn world in the next Eddie Flynn book after that, along with her friend Kate Brooks. So Eddie's in a sort of very small firm now with a group of people around him, and that's been good. It's been really fun to write that because they all complement each other, and they're all kind of people who don't really fit anywhere else, through different character traits or problems that they have. But they all seem to fit together here and work together very well. But
they're also conscientious,
yes,
in their own way, and maybe about different things, and passionate about different things.
They are, yes. So Harry is very much still kind of in love with the law, but he also has, through Eddie, he has learnt that there are limitations to the law, that justice and the law can be two very different things very often. And then there's Kate Brooks, who was... she grew up as a daughter of a police officer in New Jersey, and her next door neighbour was Block. That's how they know each other. And she, through hard work, got to work in Manhattan and got into a law firm. And her parents made very significant sacrifices for her to do that, and she recognises that and wants to pay that back. And when she got into the law firm, she found out that a lot of young female lawyers come up against various degrees of sex discrimination in this career, which is widespread in every country. So she had to deal with that, and now she represents women who are going through the same thing. And she works along with Eddie and complements Eddie because she is slightly more idealistic than he is now. She's not as damaged and as cynical as Eddie is. And she's also more forthright because her father was a police officer, so she still does kind of believe in the law. And then you have Block, who nobody really likes. She doesn't speak very much. She's very monosyllabic
she's
and
great.
Slightly psychopathic. But she will see something that nobody else will see.
Yeah.
And fixate on that and pick away at that to get to the truth. And then there's two other characters now. Then there's Gabriel Lake.
And was he just introduced?
He's just introduced in The Accomplice.
Yeah.
I wanted to write about profiling, FBI profiling, because the first time I came across it was when I read Silence of the Lambs, and that's all set in the Behavioral Analysis Unit in the FBI in Quantico. And I didn't know what an FBI profiler was. They write profiles of offenders, of very serious, violent murderers. And I wanted to know, well, how do they do that? And I'd watch shows like, Criminal Minds and all this, and there's God knows how many series and shows about it. But I wanted to know how it was really done. So for The Accomplice, I did about 6 weeks of research just on FBI profiling.
Really?
And because I wanted to know how it worked. And then I found out it doesn't work at all. So very briefly.
What, do they all make it up?
Basically, yes.
Right.
So the way it works is this. It used to be that they would separate killers into 2 different categories. So there was organized killers and disorganized killers. And you'll see that if you watched Mindhunter or stuff like this, which is about the guys who developed this by interviewing serial killers. But what they sort of admitted to themselves, and the FBI have said, yes, this entire system is completely flawed. They have said, well, there's elements of organization and disorganization in nearly every murder that we investigate. And having a different categories for these killers doesn't work at all. It's not realistic. So the way they do it now is they have like a tree plan sort of thing. So they'll go to a crime and they'll write down all the data they can get from it. And then it's like they follow this route, which will lead them to a profile. Because there's no set, and even now, there's no set criteria of what should be in a profile. And profiles are really, even today, only as good as the profiler who wrote it.
Right.
So, for example, the Washington sniper was let go 3 times. Police stopped him, and he's let go 3 times because he didn't fit their profile. So profiles, in terms of how effective they are, they have hundreds and thousands of profiles are written every year. It's only ever successfully led to the capture of 1 person.
Wow.
But because the profile was wrong, about 50 people got to go free, which is why the FBI redesigned everything. So what they did, their system now is they interviewed 96 known serial killers and got all their personal information and interviewed them and talked to them about their stuff and got psychologists and all involved. So now on the big bifurcation in this profiling subset now is whether or not the body was moved.
Okay.
So they divided into killers who leave the body were at the point of murder and another set of killers who move the body. So for example, according to the FBI, if a killer moves a body, there's a 40% chance either the killer or the killer's parents were in the military.
Right, okay.
Now, there's obvious problems with this thing as well. First of all, 96 is a very small number of serial people they
sample,
interview.
yeah.
To base your analysis of thousands of murders, you're going to do that based on your interviewing of 96 people. That's not good. Also, serial killers may, believe it or not, they may not be 100% honest with the FBI. And I don't know if we should really rely on what they say. So there's a lot of problems with that. And none of it's based on the serial killers that they haven't caught.
Right, okay.
So I think there are huge problems with it still. But it's fascinating. And Gabriel Lake was in the behavioural analysis unit and recognised all these problems.
Yeah.
There are various different psychological schools of thought on how killers should be caught. And he has a very particular method which he employs, which he thinks works. And it's the one method that I saw that I thought does work. So he's in there as well, and he's ex-FBI. He left because he was shot, and he suspects he may have been set up by the federal agents. And there's another character in the books who's Denise now, who's the office secretary. And Denise is the only character in my books who's based on a real person.
Who's that?
Denise was my secretary when I was in practice, and she's exactly like Denise was, the real Denise.
Right. Same name?
Same name.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she knows it's based on her.
She knows. Oh yes.
Yeah.
I think she's very happy. she's quite happy. She asked.
Right.
She read the first couple of Eddie Flynn books and said, he needs a secretary.
There you go.
Okay.
So if we ask Steve to be put in the book, we're put in the book. Is that it?
It depends. It depends.
So we've this group now. So Gabriel Lake has joined, as you said, Eddie, Block, Harry and Kate. And don't forget the dog. The doggy's there
Clarence,
as
well. Named after Clarence.
Obviously, and Denise. So again, in terms of how the series has developed, as you said, very much about him sort of at the start. And you've developed and widened out his world, brought in new people. I also think I found personally there's a lovely balance between the plot, each story, each book is a different plot, but also sort of an update on what's going on in their personal lives, but not too much so, but a nice amount that sort of works. And I enjoy that. Do readers look for that, or is that just something you wanted to do to develop the book?
Well, I think it was readers. I think that, a lot of my readers see a hook on one of my books. I think I'll want to read that, and they'll read it, and they'll stay and read the other books for the characters.
Yeah.
Is what I found. So I think the characters is the most important thing. And a lot of people like it. It's sort of like a little dysfunctional family, that firm now. And people like that. And they want to make sure that Eddie and Harry are okay. It seems to be the main
want to make sure they're all okay.
And they like the interplay between them all, because they all have their things that they're good at and not so good at.
And they balance each other out, though. I think they will push each other if they need to, but pull them back if they need to, you know. And then, obviously, you know, your career to date has helped in terms of all of the courtroom drama and the scenes and everything. I assume you enjoy writing all of those.
I do. I do, because it's not something that's written about very much. Especially, you know, and there's two aspects to it. One, I get to write about forensic science, because there's a lot of crap, for want of a better word, which is passed off as forensic science, and it's not science at all. And each one of my books will look at a little aspect of it, and that could be handwriting. It could be DNA evidence or something like that, or blood spatter evidence. And because all of these disciplines have led to so many false convictions, especially in America. And I like to look at it and to tell people a little bit about it, so you'll learn something about it as well, but still be exciting, and you'll have that interplay between Eddie and the witness. But I also like writing about courtroom techniques, because it's a psychological battle between the lawyer and the witness. And and there are various different tricks and techniques which Eddie uses, which really work, and some of them I've used in courtrooms myself, some of them I've seen used. And it's not, you know, Tom Cruise and A Few Good Men saying, you know, you can't handle the truth and all this business. That's all great to watch, but that's not how it works. It's much more subtle, much more dramatic, and much more exciting. And I like taking the reader by the hand and saying, listen, this is how all this really works.
And that's the enjoyable part, because it's like you're lifting the lid on what really goes on, and that we're getting a sneak peek behind the scenes, you know?
Yeah, and I like that. And I think readers like it as well. They do enjoy the courtroom stuff. But it's a question now of balancing a suspenseful plot and the courtroom. And I don't want to have too much of the other. I like to have a mix of both.
And tell us about The Accomplice then. So obviously we know Gabriel Lake has been introduced, but what's the premise?
The premise is I'd done over a couple of books I'd sort of written about serial killers, and
he's not obsessed, just saying.
No, during the course of, you know, and I found out various weird, strange things which I find fascinating. And one of the things was a lot of these famous killers were married, had children, had jobs and careers. And they weren't, you know, the creepy loner guy in the scary house at the end of the street who was up all night gardening.
That's what the FBI profilers want us to think, is that it?
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I thought, wow, these just monsters just hid. And when they're caught, then, you know, there's all these articles about it, and people say, well, Hank, wait a minute, how did his wife not know? How did his partner not know? Surely you would know. I would know if I was married to a serial killer. And I thought, well, would you know? And that was the premise for it. So in The Accomplice, there is a serial killer known as the Sandman who has been identified. They know who he is. They've identified him. They go and raid his house, and he's not there, but his wife is there. And when they're going through the house, they find some very small piece of evidence which they think links her to his crimes. So they're saying not only did she know that she was married to a serial killer, but she acted as his accomplice. She says, I had no clue my husband was this monster. And she gets Eddie Flynn to defend her.
There you go. Has to be read. And that's what I love about the books as well, is that you start off with a hook like that makes you obviously want to read the rest of it. Or like 50-50, which was the two sisters were on trial for murder. Both, though, were accusing each other of having, you know. So you come up with these great lines. So when the plot pops into your head, then you decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the next book. Do you sit down and plot it out, or do you again sit down and let it unfold?
No, I usually just tend to start writing. I try to, as long as I've got an opening for the book, I'd say, well, how do we get into the story? And I would think about that for a day or two. And then I'll just start writing and I'll go from there. And I just ask myself, what is the next logical step after this? Because I need to introduce what the scenario is, what the crime is, and who the players are. And then we just go from there. And it's a terrible way to write a book. So the best way to do it is to sit down and plot it all out beforehand and have a spine of a story to follow. And then you can depart from your outline if you want to, but I just make it all up as I go along.
And is it easier to make up because you already have that group of characters there that you can just throw them all into the room and go, right, what are we doing next?
Well, yeah, it is in a way. It's easier to write a series, but it comes with its own challenges. There has to be something new in the series from the last book, and something different and more exciting. Whereas with a standalone, all bets are off. These are new characters, and you can do whatever you like with them. So, but with Eddie, like, I know what Eddie, in certain different situations, I know what Eddie would do, and that would be very different from what Kate would do or from what Block would do. So these things help move your story forward, as long as because you put the character in a situation and say, okay, well, Eddie would play it this way, Kate would go a different way, and that then develops your story. You let the characters lead it in a certain way.
So how long does it take you to write one?
Depends. It's been as quick as 6 weeks before, and I think the longest one's been about 8 months.
6 weeks. Which one was 6 weeks?
6 weeks was 13.
Right.
Wrote 13 in 6 weeks. Now, there was a 3-week break in between.
Okay, so what, you wrote it in 3 weeks?
I wrote 3 weeks. I took a 3-week break because I got stuck. There's a scene in 13 where the killer has taken over someone's apartment, and the apartment owner is lying dead in the bath, and there's a knock at the door, and it's a delivery has been left with a box, and I didn't know what was in the box. So I sat for 3 weeks going, what's in this box? Has to be something good in this box. Because, a man's come to the door and all, this must be something interesting. And then I did work out what was in the box. But that scene never made it into the book, because that launched the whole subplot, and my editor said, you don't need that subplot. And I went, yeah, you're right. But that put the brakes on for a while. So sometimes I will write 20,000 words and stop and go back and read what I have. Because there'll be things in there that I'll say, like, even sometimes a throwaway description, I'll say, okay, that could be useful later on, or that can develop into something else, or that's an opportunity for a twist there.
And the one that took 9 months then, why did that take that length?
It was just more difficult to write, I suppose. Or, I don't know, sometimes they come really easy, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it needs more thought, and I don't really know why. I think it took me a bit longer writing over COVID, because I was so distracted with everything. The world was going to hell as far as I was concerned. And then I thought, God, no. And I have to go and write and make stuff up. That was harder to write during those periods.
And it's about one a year, is it, at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you feel pressurised around that, or are you happy with that? Or
no, that's perfectly manageable for me. One a year is perfectly manageable. I've sometimes done more than that. I've done 2 a year. But one a year is perfectly good.
And so most of it has been the Eddie Flynn series, but you've done one standalone, as you said. So why did you break out for the standalone at that point?
Twisted was my backup book. So the first 3 books.
What's a backup book?
I'll tell you what it is now. So the first 3 books, when they were published, so they sold nothing. The Plea was my most successful book, which sold, I think, about 2,000 copies in a year. Before that, I think no, that was The Liar. The Liar did that. The Plea sold like 500 copies, and globally. So I thought, well, this is terrible. And the idea for 13, and I knew I hoped that would do better. And 13 is a book about a serial killer who gets on a jury, and a tagline for that book. And I thought, well, look, if 13 doesn't sell, I can't write a better Eddie Flynn book at the moment. So I'll write something else, just so I can say to my publishers, look, I'm not a one-trick pony. I'm not just a legal thriller guy. I can write a proper suspense book. To me, the Eddie Flynn books are suspense thrillers. But I want to say, look, I can do a psychological thriller as well. So I wrote Twisted as my backup book. So if 13 tanked, I can say, no, it's okay. Look, I can do something else. Look at this. But Twisted was a lot of fun to write. That really taught me how to write twists, because
In what way?
well, that's a book about twists, and it's about writers writing twists. That book takes place in a world where there is a mystery writer called J.T. LeBeau, who sold all these millions of copies of books all around the world, but nobody knows who he is. There's no photographs of him. Publishers never met him, and his identity is a total secret, and it's a pseudonym. And there's a woman called Maria who's living in basically a dysfunctional marriage. She's having an affair, and she's in a sort of, her husband's moved her to quite a lonely, barren, sort of a little sort of seaside town, and she discovers then that her husband may be J.T. LeBeau, and has millions hidden away in a bank account. So she decides it might be an idea to confront him and or kill him for this money. And then we're away to the races. But the book is written, there is a fake title page. So it says, Twisted by Steve Cavanagh on the cover. And when you open it up, it says Twisted by J.T. LeBeau. So the whole thing is written as if you're reading a J.T. LeBeau novel. And there's a note from the author at the beginning of the book to say, this is my last book, and you'll know why when you get to the end of it.
And will you do more standalone?
I have another standalone written. Won't be out next year. It'll probably be the year after.
Right. Take it from there. And when the first few you mentioned that they didn't sell brilliantly, like, was that disheartening, or did you want to keep going anyway, or what way were you thinking at that point?
It was the sort of the classic dichotomy. They all got great reviews. They were all critically successful. And the two of them won awards, and the first one was nominated for the Steel Dagger, the Ian Fleming Steel Dagger. So I thought, well, look, I'm doing something right here. But part of it may have been how some of them were presented, or maybe we didn't target the right audience, which is a learning thing for every author and every publisher when you're starting out in the series. So I think that was maybe it. And it's hard for new authors, to get attention and to get a place on the shelf. So, I just persisted. I wanted to do it, and I sort of thought 13 would do it. 13 was my fourth book, and that tagline really helped it. And Orion put an amazing cover on that book, and really backed it, and that did really well. So 13 came out in 2018, and that did change my life.
And I love the names of all of them because they're all quite short, of all the books. And as I said, usually there's a one-line premise on the front or on the back, and that literally just drags you in.
That's what it was. And I needed something, so if you're browsing and you see this tagline, go, what's that?
Yeah, I want to buy it.
Pick it up.
Yeah.
And I thought, every book since has had the tagline basically on the cover to help people just go, oh, I'll pick it up. And I find most of my readers that, nearly all of them, they'd never read it before, saw one of those books, the tagline, picked it up, and then read the whole series.
And that's the reason why. And you say 13 then changed your life.
Yeah.
Is that when you gave up being a lawyer? I was going to say lawyering. I was trying to figure out what the word
Lawyering?
was.
Doing the old lawyering?
Being a lawyer. And write full-time then, or what way did it change your life?
It was a year after that, at least. So it was April 2019, I gave up the law. And I couldn't do it anymore. Basically, that was it. I didn't have a choice. People used to always ask me, how do you balance being a lawyer and writing? And I would say, well, look, I would get up about 6 o'clock in the morning, get the kids up, get them ready for school, take them to school, go and do the law job, home about 6:30, 7, something to eat, see the family. Everyone goes to bed about 10:30 or 11, and then I start writing.
Right.
I write for 2 or 3 hours. And that's what I would say. What I realized was I wasn't saying to them, do you know what? I'm not balancing this at all. I'm doing 2 full-time jobs at once, and it would certainly affect my health. And my wife said to me, look,
Make a choice.
you need to stop doing the lawyering, because the books are going well now, and 13 had sold very well. So we had a wee bit of money behind us, and we just sort of decided I had to make the leap.
And no regrets?
No regrets at all. I occasionally drive past, Lisburn Magistrates Court, and I see some of my colleagues standing out in the rain, and I sort of think, no, it's great, I'm not there anymore. But I do miss the crack, because you get great stories.
Yeah.
And, when you see people, and some of the clients are lots of fun, and I miss my colleagues. So
I assume you meet up with them regularly to get some more nuggets, to help.
No, I haven't.
Really?
I think COVID, I was going to, but COVID interrupts that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I can't put any real stories in the books anyway,
right.
because nobody would believe them. Would say that's just absolute nonsense.
Rubbish.
There's no way that could ever happen.
So where are we with Eddie then? So The Accomplice is the latest one. So what's happening next with him? Will we have another one?
Yes, the one next year. I can't say too much about it. It's sort of like a homage to sort of 70s paranoia thrillers.
70s paranoia thrillers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I write about what scares me.
Right.
So serial killers scare me. The American legal system scares me. And sometimes the American government scares me.
Right.
So that's sort of a combination of things. And the circle, Eddie is outside of New York. He's gone to Oklahoma to represent someone.
Okay. And when you go to your publisher with these ideas, did they just say, Steve, you just do what you have to do, or do they go, seriously?
No, well, it depends. We're going to, I've been very lucky to be able to work collaboratively with them. Yeah, sometimes a book comes and it's a little bit of surprise. It's not really what they're expecting, but they're very generous.
And you're going to Oklahoma in this one because, again, you've set, most of it has been in New York,
Yes.
but you have gone outside of New York previously. And the difference is there is that the legal system in America, depending on the state you're in, can be different.
Yes, it is different. So if I want to do a death penalty case, I have to move it outside. This one is set in a sort of a slightly fictional town because it has a unique setup, this town. There's a real town called McAlinden in Oklahoma. The town in my book is called McAllister. So
Right.
it's totally different,
Yeah.
but it has the same thing. So the big industries in that town, there's the state penitentiary, which is one of the largest in the world, where they used to have rodeos and stuff, prison rodeos there. And they have a massive big underground death chamber. And the other big industry is a US military base, which they build lots of missiles and very dangerous things there. And then there's this wee town in the middle.
Right.
Where you would have, and it's mostly made up of prison officers and GIs. So you can imagine what the bars are like of an evening. So it's a unique little town, and then there's farmers and stuff in there. So it's a brilliant little mix. And I wanted to make it fictional because I didn't want to offend anybody from Oklahoma, because I've now realised I can't go back to Alabama, having written The Devil's Advocate. I'm barred now. Can't go back there.
Any other genre would you write in? Any other style of writing? Or
I'm very happy doing what I'm doing at
Yeah.
the moment,
and we're very happy to read it, so,
Well, yeah. So, I'm happy enough doing that for now.
And the other thing I suppose just to touch on before we take some questions, just the Northern Irish writing scene in general has just exploded really in the past couple of years. And interesting, you were talking there about the fact that it took a couple of books before you broke out as such. Adrian McGinty was the same. He had a huge amount of writing behind him, and then the chain happened. But we've crime writing, but we've also just general writing, like Wendy Erskine, Jan Carson, and so many other brilliant Northern Irish writers. What's your feeling on that, or your view on that, or where's all this talent coming from,
I don't know. I think it's there, and it's all over Ireland.
Yeah.
I think it's not just Northern Ireland. It's all over the whole country. I think we're a nation of storytellers, and if somebody gives us a chance, we'll tell a story and keep you there while we're telling it. So I think that's just it. We've always sort of punched above our weight in storytelling and prose and poetry, the whole of Ireland.
Yeah, and there's a great camaraderie though as well.
There is, yeah. Stuart Devil and I are doing something in a week or two in the library, and he's already said to me, "Let's just go and get drunk instead of doing this." I said, "No, we have to do the event, and then we'll get drunk
Then
afterwards."
we'll think about it. Yeah, exactly. Does anyone have any questions for Steve? Where do we start?
Hi, how are you? My name is Debbie. Thank you very much for your books. I think I've read 5 or 6 of them, including Twisted, so I recommend them to everyone.
Thank you.
You often start your story bang in the middle of the action. So my question is, do you write a preamble and edit that out, or do you actually start writing bang in the middle of the action?
No, I start writing bang in the middle of the action. It's the one thing that I learned from screenwriting, which I took with me. You can learn a lot from screenwriters, and I hugely admired writers like Tony Gilroy and Elaine May, and people like that, Brian Koppelman, David Levine. So in screenwriting, the trick is to get into a scene late and get out early. So for example, in the defense starts, that scene starts, the entire book starts with Eddie Flynn is washing his hands, and there's someone says to him, "Do exactly as I tell you or I'll put a bullet in your spine." It opens that line of dialogue. And Eddie's in a bathroom and someone has sneaked up behind him and put a gun on his back. And that's where the book starts. But you can be assured that Eddie woke up that morning and had a shower and shaved and had a cup of coffee and read the paper, got on the train, went to a diner, had his breakfast, and thought, "I'm just going to go to the toilet here." Went to the toilet and was washing his hands. But all of that, but my story didn't start until that guy said that word to him. And that's when the book starts. So you start at the very latest point.
Excellent. Good question, good answer. Any more questions? Oh, lots up here.
Hello.
Hello.
I'd like to reiterate everything the first questioner asked. I really enjoyed your books, and in only writing one a year, as soon as I start reading one of yours, I have to just finish it. Can't do anything else much.
Thanks very
so
much.
I get through them very quickly, but now I have to wait for a whole year for the next one. But I wanted to ask that you said that you just make it up as you go along, and I wanted to ask. I think the answer might be no, but do you find often that you've got to go back and introduce a character early in the story because you need them later?
More often than, thank you very much for your question. More often than not, I would do the opposite. So I write into my characters more at the beginning. So there's more description of them at the beginning because I'm trying to discover who they are, because I don't know who they are yet. Mm-hmm. And then what I have to do is to take stuff out and put it in later on and spread it about the book a wee bit, because I don't want the reader to have a page on who this character is. I'll give you a little bit of who that character is, and we'll spread it. You'll learn more about them as the book goes on. So that's the way I have to do it, because I don't know who they are. I'm layering it all there, and I often get told, no, let's find out about this character, and we'll gradually take that out and spread it out a bit.
Excellent. Now, one over here.
Hiya, I'm Joanna, and I started reading your books after the last time I saw you on Murder One.
Right. Are you here with a complaint?
I'm not. I love your books. And what I love about your books, and particularly because I read them and I also listen to them on audiobook, and I find the audiobook experience is very like listening to a caper. Is that pacing deliberate in your writing, or are you influenced by caper books or movies?
The pacing's a real deliberate thing. I'm sort of like a lot of writers that I sort of admire. My big fear is you'll get bored and you'll put the book down. I never want you to be bored. I want to keep moving the story on, or something interesting on every page. So yeah, I get afraid of people getting bored or putting the book down. So it has to be, things have to happen quickly, and lots of things happening, or you have to be engaged with the situation that the character's in. So I'm always very conscious of the reader when I'm writing, and some writers don't do that, and that works equally well for them. But for me, I need to be thinking about the reader.
Excellent
Thank you.
question. More up here, and then I'll go to the online.
Hi, I'm just wondering, as a writer and a reader, so you're 9 books in, question mark, and as a reader then, do you find you can immerse yourself in the story as a reader, or do you still have a bit of a writer head in you and you're looking at the plot and you're going, is there something going to happen here? Is there an expectation as a reader who writes when you're reading something, and can you switch off and immerse yourself in the story?
It depends. Mostly it's with the writers that I knew and read before I started writing. I can still switch off completely, and I know, I know I'm in for some enjoyment here. Sometimes I'll see something straight away. I'll notice a plot twist. I'll say, okay, you're setting that up, and I know what your twist is now. But that's very rare. Normally, if I'm engaged with the character and I care about the character, and then I can switch everything off. And that's the key to it for me, is always his character.
Hi, I just wonder, were you inspired by the other legal writers like Grisham and Turrow, or did you just want to do something completely different from them? And then just the second question is, you said you read a lot of international crime, so would you recommend other authors from around the world?
Sure. Well, Grisham, yeah, I mean, Grisham and Turrow sort of invented the modern legal thriller. The legal thriller existed before them. Agatha Christie's the best-selling author in the world. She's number one. Number two is the guy who wrote the Perry Mason series.
Really?
Yeah. And much derided in America, but he was friends with Chandler, and Chandler hugely admired him. But Grisham really did something else with it, because he took you into the lawyer's life outside of the courtroom, and so did Turrow as well. Scott Turrow, up until very recently, was a practicing lawyer, so he would only publish every couple of years. But Grisham was then, he was straight into it, one a year. But quite often they don't write too much about trials. Turrow does more than Grisham. Grisham's more interested in writing about the law itself and its effect on people. So yes, I have to say I am very much influenced by both of them, and admire both of them. In terms of writers from around the world, you're at an Irish crime writing festival, so I would say, Claire Allen, Sharon Dempsey, all of the writers that you've got here, Stuart Neville, who we've talked about already.
Yeah.
So and a lot of those books are there for sale.
Brian
So
McGilloway, Adrian McKenty.
Brian
yeah.
McGilloway, Adrian McKenty, they're all there for sale. So I would stick with Irish for this weekend.
Some of them are coming up next. So I'm just going to take an online question, if I can go all the way back down here. So we have people who are tuning in online. So I'll just come over to Teresa.
Hi, Steve.
Hi.
Great interview. Obviously, everyone's enjoying it online. So through Twitter, there's a question you mentioned about, would you know if your partner or your husband, wife, etc., was a serial killer? So this question says, does Mrs. C ever get concerned about how your mind is working?
No, no. She's only concerned if I've taken the bins out or not.
And from our Zoom, when you write your standalones, are you thinking about / distracted by ideas for the series, or are you all in with your standalone that you're writing?
No, I'm all in with that story. If I get a story that I want to tell, that's really what I focus on until I'm finishing it, and then I will sort of think, well, what's next, and then those ideas will start filtering through. Hopefully, touch wood or whatever. Yes.
Excellent.
So you've set your books in the States. So did you actually travel and visit locations, or how did you get around that?
I wrote the first 3 books without ever having set foot in the United States. I have been there since a few times and done a couple of book tours there, which allowed me to see quite a lot of the country. At the start I hadn't been there at all. But I'm not one of these writers who has to go and see a place to write about it. I know there are some people who do have to do that, and that's fine, that's great. But I don't have to do that. And quite often I'm quite happy to make up a place. Because sometimes in a way that's more fun. And I suppose in a way it's more realistic, because no matter how real a place is, and you've been there and you've smelt what it smells like, and you've put your foot in the ground and you've been everywhere and you know everything about it, you've spoken to people about it, you can still only ever render your sense of that place on the page. Someone else could have lived there longer than you and will have a totally different sense of it. So I always think it's you could never bring a place completely to life. It'll always be an interpretation of that. So I think sometimes I'll cut that. I'll just make it all up. It's called this, and it's not real. So yeah.
Excellent, good question. Any more questions? Yep.
Thank you. Just you mentioned your taglines and how that sort of informs your story a little bit when you're writing. Do you ever have arguments with your editors about having to change either the titles or the tagline, or are you quite precious about that?
No, we don't really have arguments. We're all sort of scratching our heads, going, "What the hell is a good title for this book?" Because I am terrible at titles. So The Defence was my title, The Plea was my title. The Liar, we went through about 30 different options for it. My title for 13 was Rogue Juror, which was awful. And my editor came up with the title for 13. 50-50 was one I named. I got that one through, and 50-50 kind of worked. What else? What have we done? The Devil's Advocate was, we went through, God, a torturous amount for that. The Accomplice, we went through a lot of iterations of that as well. And the new book, we're getting ready to start all of that business all over again. But I think the new one should be okay. I'm hoping. We'll just see. But no, I'm terrible at titles. I need lots of help with that.
A very difficult question over here.
Hi, Steve.
I know
When you were talking about your writing process, and like one book took X amount of weeks and another book took 8 months, I'm just wondering, when you did the transition from being, a writer, kind of going into the early hours, to a full-time writer, did that intimidate the process? Number one, this thing of, I am officially, my full job as a writer, and has the enjoyment stayed the same from the very first book to the book you're writing on now?
Yeah, I think it's been, well, the enjoyment always fluctuates a bit. If I'm in a book and I'm writing and I know where it's going, I enjoy it. But there are days when you're going, God, I really don't want to go and sit and have to write this book. Game of Thrones is on. I could sit and watch that instead. And when I made the transition, initially I was going out in the morning. I dropped the kids at school, and I would go out to a coffee shop or a library, and I would sit and write. And then we moved house, and I have an office now. So when I get the kids go up to school, I go to the office and write. But I don't think I'm writing any faster, really, to be honest, because in those other times when I was working, I knew I'd only had a short amount of time to do work. I think I am writing a wee bit faster, but, you still get, there's more distractions, I think, And people also, the other problem is, nobody thinks you're actually working, because they think, sure, she's not working anymore. So you get a phone call, here, you know when you're not working, will you come and help me lift this sofa? I am working. I have an office and I write books. That's a work. You're not working. You can do that. So yeah, the time kind of fills.
Expands to fill, isn't that it? Yeah.
So true. Any more? How are we doing up there? Any more questions? Am I allowed to ask a question? Do you start off, Steve, when you come up with an idea for a book? Well, how do you start off? Is it a plot idea, or is it a character idea? What's that first grain?
It's always a situation, a premise. What if this a terrible thing happened? Or what if you were in this situation? That's how I come up with my ideas, and I have a little yellow notebook at home where I write down terrible things that could happen to people. And that's my idea book. Some writers are different. Some writers start with a theme, which is kind of beyond me. I don't know how they do that, but they do it and it works for them, and it's whatever works for you. Some people start off with a character or a situation. The book I'm writing at the moment started off just with a situation. What if this was happening and this happened? So normally it's me going, what's the worst thing that could happen here at any stage, and then I go from there.
And I was going to say, I assume though you've come up with some ideas and they haven't worked.
I've only stopped writing one book,
Right.
and I think it would work, but I think the subject matter of it, it was about mass shootings in America, and I think that subject matter is I don't know if it's the right time. I would feel bad about it. Michael Connolly also has a book which he's spoken about on the exact same subject, which he has tried to write 4 times, and at every stage has stopped and thought, no, it's not the right time. And I'm talking to him about it. And he's spoken about it as well. So there are stories to be told, but it's trying to approach that correctly. And because the thing is, you know, if you say you give that book to your publisher, and they're getting set to publish it, and there's a mass shooting that day in America, you know, it wouldn't feel right.
Right. Yeah.
You know, even though, and I know that the book Michael's going to write and the book I'm going to write is very much, this is a terrible problem which has to stop somehow. But even that, you know, it may not be appropriate to do, or some people might be offended by it. So that's very hard. So I don't know if I'll ever finish that one.
And how far into it did you get?
Not very far, but 50 pages in.
Right.
And it was a good premise and a good story and socially responsible about the topic, and very sensitive to the topic. But it's just one of those things. I'm just not sure people are ready for sort of thought-provoking novel about it yet. Because I mean, the thing is about my books as well. I'm not sitting you down saying, right, here's everything that's wrong with the world and listen to me. People need to be entertained. That's a primary reason for doing it. And I think that's sort of subject, although there have been some books, a couple of good books last year about it, which published about it. But I don't know, I'm slightly wary of writing it.
So finally, before we finish up, what advice then would you have for anybody who's, obviously we have a good few writers in the audience, so anyone starting out who has the book under the bed or in the free laptop that they got from Carphone Warehouse, you know?
Yeah, if you've got that laptop, throw it in the bin, buy. My advice is to buy something that you can work with easily. Invest a wee bit in your writing, buy some nice pens and notebooks, and don't be afraid to write. I was thinking, I was afraid of it for a long time and thought I couldn't do it. And I would just say, go for it. And the trick is to write as much as you can every day. I don't write every day.
Right.
But when I was starting off, I did.
Yeah.
And that really helped me to build up that muscle.
Routine. And
be prepared for it to be bad in the first instance, because mine was bad in the first instance, and lots of it had to be changed. But the more you write, the better you get. And also read. You can't do one without the other. You have to read, and because you need to know A, what's out there now, and B, every book that's been published. You'll never know all of that, but the more you build your narrative knowledge, the better the writer you'll be.
Great.
Tips. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Breda.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Steve Cavanagh.
Thank you.
That was absolutely fantastic.
Thanks, Breda.
Thank you for the questions online, and thank you for your audience questions. Steve is signing now upstairs on level 3. So we're going to whip off his microphone and take him up there, and you'll be able to pick up books and get him to sign them, basically. That's
great. Thank you.
So thank you very much indeed. I hope some of you are staying on for the next panel when we have Brian McGillivray and Claire Allen and Louise Phillips, and we'll be live online for that too. So we look forward to seeing you. Thank you for coming.